In this fifth video of the beginner's course for Amazon Sumerian, we're going to look at lighting. More specifically, we're going to look at the lighting component and also light types. So let's get started. I'm returning to the scene that we have been building throughout this course, and we, for the most part, have just been covering several topics and haven't gotten yet to the building, but we will start building more, I promise you soon. We just want to cover some basics first. So first of all, let's look at lighting here. And if we look at the default lights that we have in our component, the component default lights up here in the entities panel, if I unfold that, I will expand the default lights. I have three different light types here. Or not three different light types, three different directional lights. Now, directional lights work as such that they mimic sunlight or moonlight or a light source that is infinitely far away or just really far away. So let's look at these different light types. Now I'm going to look at this light here and I'm going to move it up. All right. Now, the interesting thing about directional lights is that their translation or their locational values within a scene don't change really anything. So if I start moving this light around, it doesn't, I do see the translation values changing over here, but it doesn't make a difference to my scene. That's because the light source, even though we have it actually placed here in this scene, the light source is still coming from infinitely far away. So its location here and towards the center of our scene doesn't make a difference. So I can change the translations all I want. It won't make a difference. However, if I switch over to rotation and I start rotating the scene, it starts making a bit of a difference. Now, let's hide these other two lights here so we can see a little bit better. So over here in the entities panel, I just clicked the eye icon. That is to hide or make visible, depending on what you're trying to do, the certain entities you have. So these key and rim lights, I hid those by clicking the eye icon. Now, as I rotate as I rotate this directional light, I'm starting to see a little bit of a difference in our in the lighting within our scene. It gets a little bit lighter. Maybe if well, it's because it's so gray that it's kind of hard to see the difference. Let's change that up to almost white. Good, and we'll move this. Oh, I'm trying to grab certain rings. There we go. Now we can kind of see it change a little bit more. I changed the color of the table so that when I rotate it, you can see that it's reflected more directly. So when it's pointing straight down, that means the light source is coming straight down on it. When it's rotated more in this fashion, the light source is coming more at an angle. So that is what is important to remember about directional lights, is that the translation values do not matter while the rotation values do matter. Okay, now I'm going to hide this light as well. Now it still looks like there's light in our scene, and that's because we still have this sky sphere in the background. But although that is it's light in color, that texture is light in color, so that's why it kind of looks like there's still light, but really there isn't. Especially if you look at these entities we have, they are very dark, and that's because we don't have lights in our scene to actually to be reflected off of. But let's add some other lights to see how they work. So I'm going to go ahead and click a spotlight, and I'm going to drag this one up using the translation handles. Now you can see the cone that comes out of this spotlight, and that's because that is the shape of the light. Now it's pointing really vertically, it is pointing 100% vertical. But if I start rotating this down, now we can kind of start seeing how this light is, how these lights actually work. So as I rotate it down, you start seeing that now we can see that there's a big difference here. Where the light cone actually touches this table, it's very light, and where it doesn't touch, it's still very dark, still in shadow. Now, you might notice that there's no shadow down below the table on the ground here. Well, we can change that by going into the light component of our light. And let's actually change the name of this. We added a light. Let's call it what it is. Spotlight. And then let's collapse the transform component and then expand the light component. If you go down to the shadows property, there's a shadows checkbox. If I check that, then we can start getting some shadows within our scene. Do remember that shadows can be very heavy for scene size, and so if you need it on, you by any means turn it on, but if you don't need it, consider keeping those off. So it's just depending on what you're trying to do, but just remember the shadows are heavy for scene size. And so that's how you would add shadows, and you can also add shadows to directional lights. You cannot add them to point lights, which we will get to shortly, but you can add them for directional. We do not have those turned on for the fill lights, the directional lights that are already there for the scene. All right, I'm going to go ahead and hide the spotlight, and now I'm going to create another entity, and let's add a point light. And let's go back real quick to spotlight. Remember that for the directional lights, translation values did not matter, rotation values did matter. They both matter for a spotlight. So where you place it and how you rotate it does make a difference on the light emission coming from that light source. Now, we did just create another light over here. We'll select that, and let's rename this one Point Light. I'll go ahead and select the translation handles, and I'll just start bringing that up. The point light is actually my favorite because it reflects, it's like a light bulb. So it feels very realistic inside of a scene. So as you move it up and down, you see how it starts feeling like you're in an actual room. So the closer I get, the brighter it gets, the farther away, the darker it gets. And if you zoom out a bit, you can see how far the light actually reaches by these rims right here. By that frame, you can see how far out the light will reach. You can change, and this is true for all of them, you can change the intensity, the specular properties, and the range. Like, that's how far out it reaches. I don't actually want to change either of those. I'll just bring it back to the way it was. And then, there we go. I'm just hitting undo. All right, so let's zoom back in here. And let's add another point light. So now we'll make it sort of feel for this scene that we're building. We'll make it feel like we're in a room. So I already have one point light. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate that. Then I get a point light 2. When I duplicate an entity, it'll always be sitting in the same location as the original, and so it doesn't appear that there are 2. That's because they're sitting right on top of each other. So if I have point light 2 selected, I can then drag that out over here to start getting seeing it. Okay, and that is what that's how we're gonna leave our lights. You can really place these wherever you'd like. And to be honest, you can still turn on the directional lights. You can keep those on if you want. It's probably getting a little bit bright. You don't have to have the point lights. You can keep really any kind of light source you want. You can use the spotlight instead, so that's really up to you. But we just wanted to cover real quickly how lights work. Now remember, we use the template, the default lighting scene template, and so that will always come with these default lights. I'm actually going to turn these on and then just turn the default lights, the parent entity off. So then now we can just now we can see really what is being used in our scene, which is just these point light, and then point light 2. And that is the basics of lights. Remember that for each light source, you can go over here into the inspector panel and change some property values. You can actually even change the type to either be a point, directional, or spot. So even though I added a point light, I can go into that point light and change it to a directional or a spot or anything I want. But I will leave it at that for now. In the next video, we're going to look at how to import external assets and also how to resize those assets. So I hope you join us for the next video. Thanks for joining us for this one. Thanks.